We had previously discussed Charlemagne being crowned the first Holy Roman Emperor on Christmas Day in the year 800 by the Pope, and thus reclaiming the Roman heritage that the West had thought had been lost to the Byzantine Empire. This establishes the Carolingian dynasty after his name, Charles or Karl, the Carolingian dynasty. The manuscript on your right was meant to commemorate that coronation in the year 800, and there are various elements of it that relate to his new status as Holy Roman Emperor. Obviously, the purple color of the manuscript leaf is part of that, the imperial color of purple. But over and above that, the style of the piece shows quite a bit of similarity to old Roman art, none of the anti-classical style that had been much more common. And this is again to show that he is now reviving the Roman Empire, and in fact it's in keeping with his colors that read the renewal of the Roman Empire next to his portrait. We had seen other renaissances, call this the Carolingian Renaissance. For example, in Byzantium, a little bit later, we see the Macedonian Renaissance, where we also see a revival of interest in ancient Roman art. These are the small R renaissances of the Middle Ages, and a reminder that Rome is never really gone. However, the interest in a renaissance that we see under the reign of Charlemagne dies out after the death of Charlemagne. After he dies in 814, art quickly moves in a new direction that is significantly more expressive and linear rather than monumental and sculptural, which is what we see with the St. Matthew on the right. As we move later in the Holy Roman Empire, the next dynasty, the Ottonian dynasty, also shows this same interest in a sort of expressive style. We as historians like renaissances, but really the more influential style is this linear expressive style that we see here. And so we're looking at this bronze door, and while we're comparing painting in a book to cast bronze, we can still see some of the interest in expressiveness, in a sort of linearity and nervousness. These Dr. Seuss trees that you see back here in the manuscript also reappear here in the bronze doors 200 years later. If we look at a close-up here of Adam, you can see that same interest in sort of facial expressions as well. So this is all a hallmark of this sort of expressive style that continues through the ages in the Holy Roman Empire. The scene that we're seeing here is God coming to the Garden of Eden and finding Adam and Eve having betrayed him, having disobeyed his orders and eaten from the tree of knowledge. They now are aware they're naked and cover themselves up. And God stands in judgment, storming in, his robe blowing in the wind, and he points at Adam. And you can see that Adam leans out from the back of the wall. And Adam hides himself in shame. The expression on his face is quite shamed as well. But you'll notice that he's trying to basically say it wasn't my fault. He's pointing behind him. It's not you that God points to Adam. Adam points back to Eve and says it's really her fault. And what Eve does is, again, covering up her nakedness, she points down to the serpent down below, who looks like one of those old Roman serpents, doesn't he? That we saw in the Jonah and the whale fresco in the catacombs. But he's there sort of spitting at her and barking back. No, really, it's all your fault anyway. So everyone's trying to pass the buck. But of course God knows better. Again, everything is told through gesture, and it's quite expressive and linear and sort of elongated, thin figures. It's important to notice here that God looks like Christ, and in fact, as Christ, he looks very much like a pantocrator image, where you see he holds the book in one hand and gestures with his finger as the other, and appears with that same nimbus behind his head as he points out toward Adam. The reason he looks like Byzantine types of Christ is that under the Ottonians, this second dynasty of emperors, we begin to see an attempt at forging a peace with the Byzantine Empire. And in fact, Otto II, the Emperor Otto II, in the year 972, was married to the daughter of the Byzantine Emperor, her name Theophanu. And so what we see when we look at Ottonian art, this later Holy Roman Empire, is something different from early on. Under Charlemagne, we had an interest in ancient Roman art, which shifted to a much more expressive linear style, which we still see here. But we pick up this influence of Byzantine art as well. Very, very strong during the second part of the Holy Roman Empire. But we don't see it early on under Charlemagne, under the Carolingian dynasty. Now, our work that we've been looking at here is part of a pair of bronze doors that were originally placed on the side of a monastic chapel. This was part of a monastery, and was commissioned by the bishop of the monastery, Bishop Bernward, from the monastery at Hildesheim. He was very, very close to the Ottonian court. He was the teacher of Otto III when he was a child, and this was the doorway that would lead from his bishop's house into the church. So he passed through these doors every day. And as we look at the entire doors, they're cast in bronze. You can see that they're really quite massive, and about 11.5 feet tall, cast in a single piece. And each of the doors has 8 scenes. On the left-hand side, we have the sequence we've been talking about, the Old Testament. This is the creation of man and the original sin and its consequences. And it starts at the top, where we see God creating Adam. Eve is there already because he's in her head, or in his head at this point. God knows he's going to create Eve too. So this is the idea of Eve, again with those comic book trees, an angel up above. So the creation of Adam here. And we read then the sequence from top to bottom, where as we work our way through the fall of man, which we looked at before, we find ourselves at the bottom with Cain slaying Abel, and there's another hand of God in judgment of Cain. On the opposite side, it reads the exact opposite direction. So the fall of man reads top to bottom. You fall, if you will. The next side shows the salvation of man through the life of Christ, and it reads from bottom to top. So it makes perfect sense theologically. And we think Bishop Bernward played a role in helping design the layout of the doors. So it starts at the bottom on the right, where we did the huge U shape. And there we see the angel appearing to Mary, saying, "You will bear Christ." This is, in many ways, sort of the opposite, if you will, from the corner at the top, where we see God creating Adam. Here, an angel is about to create Christ. And then at the very end, we see Christ leaving the earth. He's ditching Mary Magdalene here. He's about to ascend back to God the Father, and he tells her, "Don't touch me because I haven't yet ascended to heaven." So it seems as if there's been quite a bit of thought put into not only the direction in which the scenes were laid out, but also how they're paired. Because we'll see that across the doors, side to side, typology is used to pair the different scenes. So we were looking here at the judgment of Adam and Eve, God appearing to them after the fall. Directly next to that, we see Christ being judged as well, being brought before Pilate to be judged and eventually crucified, which is the next scene above it. And the difference, of course, is that they're both, the similarities, they are obviously both scenes of judgment. But in this case, this is a just judgment. God is right, Adam is wrong. Christ, however, here is innocent. And thus this is an improper judgment. And whereas the demon, Satan, has caused these people to sin, here the demon reappears and causes Pilate to judge Christ, guilty of something he isn't really guilty of in the first place. So you can see how the typology works out here. Two scenes of judgment, but then we get these back and forth parallels. The guilt of Adam, the sinlessness of Christ. At the very top, we see the creation scene, which we looked at before, and Christ leaving Mary. Here, God comes to earth and touches Adam to create him. Here, God, in the form of Christ, leaves the earth and tells Mary not to touch him. So there are all these back and forth parallels between the different scenes that are based on this medieval idea of typology, that scenes from the Old Testament mirror scenes from the New Testament in interesting and enlightening ways. Directly beneath it, and this will be the last one we see, here's the marriage of Adam and Eve. Eve has been created, she's now being presented to Adam. So here's God presenting Eve to her new husband. And here we see the three women named Mary coming to the grave of Christ and being told by an angel that he's not here. Again, in each of them, it's a joyous occasion, a joyous meeting between heaven and earth, where great news is brought. In this case, Adam is stoked that he finally has a mate, and here the three women who have come to mourn are now ecstatic that they've found out that Christ is no longer there. And I have a detail here of Christ. This, again, this interest in expressiveness. This happy Adam can't wait to get his hands on Eve, of course not knowing at this point exactly where that's going to end. So, again, this is typical for Ottonian art, the later empires, this expressiveness that we see here. But melded into that certain elements that borrow quite heavily from Byzantine